Hello.
Hello.
My question is related to some of the notes that you make in your book about fellow detainees who are released. And I was wondering if you could update us on whether or not any of these detainees have spoken or written about their experiences like you have.
Yes, I work for an organization called cageprisoners.com, and I'm its spokesman. It is the most comprehensive listing of the detainees, particularly in Guantanamo, but not exclusively. And I've had the opportunity to meet with and speak to many of the former detainees of Guantanamo. That includes Russians, it includes some Chinese, it includes several people from the Arab and Middle Eastern world, Pakistanis, and all of the British detainees that have been released. Some of them have chosen not to speak in public in the way that I have, but there are many reasons for that. A few of them have been affected psychologically as a result of their time and wish not to repeat their story, because one of the things with the media and indeed events like this is that you are forced to speak about things that are very personal and also quite difficult to relate. The other reasons, I think, are that people just want to get on with their lives, and that is that if you continue to dwell upon this, and it's been almost 2 years since I've been released, and I am being asked literally the same questions again and again, despite having written a book about it and done more interviews than I can remember. And that is the nature of the beast. You must take this role on and be prepared for all the psychological and mental effects of speaking in such a way. However, some of them, in fact, are on a tour in a different way. Three of them have produced a film called The Road to Guantanamo, which I believe won the Best Director award in one of the Berlin film festivals. And they are on a tour around the world promoting and talking about their experiences, which were quite different to mine in many senses. There are other detainees, also former detainees in Pakistan and Afghanistan, who've written books about their experiences. And again, that's relative to what they have known and seen. The reason why I think people have been interested in my story is one of the most obvious ones, and that is being an English speaker. And the reality, of course, of all of this is that the majority of detainees are not English speakers. So it's strange because I'm not very representative of a great number of detainees in the sense that I'm from the Western world. I speak English, and that's the language I communicate in. Most of the people held there communicate in Pashto, Farsi, Uyghur, Arabic, even Bosnian, Serbo-Croat. So despite that, I also have been in contact with several of the family members of people still detained there, and campaigned with them and for them for the return of their loved ones, or for justice in a court of law. And I think the experiences of the former detainees is something that's sought by many family members, that they would like to hear what we as detainees last heard of their loved ones. So whenever somebody's released, after giving the person obviously time to spend with their family in return, we try to contact them and to get some information about the latest news there. The other thing that we do also is regular contact with all of the lawyers, the Centre for Constitutional Rights, Reprieve here, which is an organisation run by Clive Stafford Smith, and Amnesty International, regularly documenting, detailing, and speaking to people who are in the know about what's taking place in Guantanamo, which at the moment doesn't seem to be very much.
Are there any questions that people would like to ask from the audience? Could you go up to the mic here? Is it turned on? And if you could just tell us who you are, that'd be great.
Hello, I'm Sadika. We know that you were detained in Pakistan, but then how did you end up being in Bagram and Kandahar? And were you being informed like why you were being from one place to the other?
Assalamu alaikum. I was initially, as I said, detained in Pakistan, and as I said, I was kidnapped from my house, where I was literally taken from the front door with a gun put to my head by several gun-toting, unidentified people. The strange thing was they didn't ever say who they were. They never even asked me who I was, and The even stranger thing was that they didn't even search me. As a result, just like now, I had a mobile phone in my pocket, so that when they took me to the cell, I still had it with me. And I managed to make a phone call, an international phone call from the cell to my father and said, "Dad, I've been kidnapped. There are Americans present and I don't know what I'm supposed to have done, but I'm really scared." My poor father was so shocked that he whispered back down the phone. From that point onwards, it was unclear to me exactly what they wanted to do with me, what they wanted me for, and where I was going. But as time moved on, I learned that I was going to Kandahar, and then I was moved to Bagram, and then to Guantanamo Bay. The whole reason behind that, to me, that system, that reason of transfer from one place to another, 4 transfers, is still unclear to me. One of the things that I found is most consistent in all of this is inconsistency. You don't actually know, and I think sometimes we tend to give the intelligence agencies a little more credit than is due. You don't have to be intelligent to join the intelligence agencies. I know that because they offered me work for them. With a gun to my head, of course. But so it's difficult for me to know why exactly it is that they use this process. The only thing I'll tell you is that it's a process that's used on many detainees. Many have been taken from places around the world and have been shipped to a central point. When I was in Bagram, for example, I came across detainees who had been literally kidnapped from the streets of Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Gambia, Zambia, Pakistan. Amazing. I came across one detainee who told his wife that he's going out to buy a pound of tomatoes and he'd be back. He never returned. His wife's still waiting for him. So there are these types of situations that took place. But I think that Bagram was probably the central point, because if you go according to the map on from Azerbaijan, to get to Guantanamo, you don't go east, you go west. But they brought them all east, and that was to Bagram, which is in Afghanistan. So I think it was some sort of central holding point. That's all I know.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Samia from Algeria. It's very interesting to hear your personal stories. I have heard many Arabic speakers' stories. So I was just wondering, what would you suggest for us, not only as Americans or as humans in general, to do for those who are still in the Bay?
Far be it from me to tell President Bush what to do, but I know what I'd like to tell him to do. But as far as the United States people are concerned, and that's who you really mean when you're talking about, it's hard for me to tell you in America what you should be doing. First of all, because I don't know America. I've never been there. I can understand the psyche of a lot of the people there because of my experience. And I understand also that there has been post 9/11 a great atmosphere of fear that has frightened a lot of people from actually being activists. But when I look at, for example, organizations like the Center for Constitutional Rights, they seem to be almost this heroically, in a sense, taking on a system, a government, which the rest of the world recognizes has caused so much pain and suffering. But that a greater part of the population is still supporting. All I can say is that if you look at this, for the sense of, even if people think that these people there are terrorists and so forth, is that at least the minimum you could do is try to have due process enabled. Due process has been enabled in the United States of America for some of the worst criminals on earth. And detainees in Guantanamo and elsewhere do not even get this right afforded to them. So it sends a message to the rest of the world which says that America, as it is today, doesn't even believe in its own laws. So I think that that's one of the things that people need to campaign for, is to support organizations like Center for Constitutional Rights and organizations, of course, like the one that I work for, Caged Prisoners, which is, even by visiting the websites and having a look at some of the cases, I think that ignorance breeds hatred. It's important to recognize that these people held there, as much as they're being demonized, are human beings, and to recognize the personal individual stories of these people, and then to start thinking and asking questions. Do the facts of the reality of what we know tally with the things that we're being told outside an arena where it's impossible to verify the statements that are being made by the captors? I think all of these things are very paramount to recognize a way in which you can do something.
My name is Chris Pyle. I teach here in Hollywood. I read your book with great interest. It's a superb piece of work. I congratulate you highly. One of the parts that intrigued me the most, perhaps because I'm a former intelligence officer, is the nature of the questions that were asked to you by different teams of interrogators. Were they seeking to obtain information about what they suspected were plots against U.S. forces? Were they seeking to ask you to incriminate yourself in plots of their imagining? Were they simply asking rote questions, the purposes of which really made very little sense at all?
How about if I said a combination of all of the above? I think I had perhaps faced over 300 interrogations. I didn't count them all, but I was told that it was approximately that figure. So you can imagine that the nature of the types of interrogations varied. And that's why I'm quite serious when I say all of the above, all those manners of interrogation, and all the reasons behind the interrogation were included. I think some of the things, just to give you a little taste of the types of things they said. Once I was asked if I could lift my top off so that one of the interrogators could have a look, and I said, "Why would you want to do that? You already have pictures of me naked, or hundreds of them." And he said, "Well, no, I just wanted to check." And so I did. I lifted it up, and then he said, "Oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter," and put it down. Later, a year and a half later, after he asked me this question, I found out from a detainee who had met another person, and he said that he had an instructor in a training camp that was an Al-Qaeda training camp, who had the same name as me, or the same, what's known as a kunya in Arabic, the father of so-and-so, the Abu name as it's called. And this person was supposed to be a member of Al-Qaeda, or an instructor. Now, the description given about this person is that he had a bullet hole in his chest, or a bullet wound in his chest, and that he had a similar name to me, he had of Pakistani origin. But that's where the similarity ended. This FBI officer had thought that I was the same person. What he failed to check was that this person was 6'3", and I am 5'3". Minor error, I know, easily done. But these are the types of things taking place. Another example I'll give you was that when they seized me in Pakistan, they took my laptop. And on my laptop were all sorts of pictures, as indeed there would be on any person's laptop, graphic images that are stored. In my temporary internet cache files, there was a picture of the Pope, as indeed there was of BBC reporter Kate Clark, and a camel spider, and a man on a beach. These had been deleted, and the US CIA agency had managed to undelete them and bought photographs of these things. Mr. Begg, why have you got a picture of the Pope on your laptop? Now, that sounds funny, but when I was talking about the really frightening part of interrogation in Bagram, it was during this period. They seriously thought I was involved in some plot. What plot, I don't know. What, to convert the Pope to Islam? Or to perhaps something a little more sinister than that, I don't know. But I had to explain to them why these pictures would be on my laptop without the luxury of having my laptop in front of them, and then to explain them why they would have been deleted. And I explained this whole process of temporary internet cache files, and that the BBC World Service, the BBC was my homepage, and that these are from the BBC page. But it was almost impossible to argue this point to some of these interrogators. One of them actually said that I'm a Catholic, and therefore that if anything happens to the Pope, I'm going to break every finger in your hand. And again, it was ludicrous, but how does one counter these types of allegations when common sense just doesn't apply? And there were a whole score of these types of things. I've mentioned quite clearly that in 1993, for example, I visited a camp, a training camp that was run by the Pakistani or Kashmiri Pakistanis in '93. It was part of a visit of when I was there for a short while, and I had an opportunity to visit this place. This place was closed down by the Taliban in 1994, and also it was part of the anti-Taliban Northern Alliance. And I didn't visit it ever again. I wasn't involved in the training. And it's information that they didn't get from me by coercion. It's information that I volunteered in order to try to explain some things. And I said that I sent some money to this place, a couple of £100, perhaps $200 or $300 in your equivalent. They then used this as a statement against me to say that the money that I'd given to this camp had somehow been utilized, wait for it, by the September 11th hijackers almost 8 years later. These are the types of sort of statements that were used to frighten, to try to justify, to try to fit the square into the circle in order to achieve results and to tell people that higher up that yes, we really have got this guy, he's a real terrorist.
I wonder if you're having any hope of getting your passport back. And I hope there's some more questions coming from the audience.
I have my passport. It was never taken away from me. What I don't have is the ability to travel on it without express permission. And I think just to, perhaps this might be leading towards, a question about any possible visit to the United States of America. People less frightening or dangerous than me have been refused entry to the United States of America. Cat Stevens, the former Cat Stevens, Youth of Islam, was refused entry. The most senior advisor on Muslim affairs to the British government here has also been refused entry. And I doubt very much that if I was indeed given entry, I would be refused exit. From the United States, that is. You're supposed to laugh at that one.